Welcome to the Pixelated Perfect podcast. Hi, Sam. Welcome back to the Pixelated Perfect podcast.
Hi, Diane. It's good to see you again.
Yeah. So we're going to kind of flip the script for this episode. So what we're going to be doing is Sam will be interviewing me, asking me questions about how I got started in my career, some challenges I had, some, I guess, happy things that happened, and kind of what has led me to kind of where I am today and maybe where I could potentially go. So thank you so much for being here, and thank you so much for kind of taking the lead and kind of putting me through the questionnaire, the ringer. I'm excited to kind of have a great conversation with you.
Yeah, Diane, I'm excited to learn a lot, learn more about what you do at TDP, how you got to where you're at. I've been working with you for, a past couple months now, and I got to learn a little bit about you and your background in our last chat. I would love to learn more about just how you got into design and how you got to co-founding an entire design company.
Yeah, for sure. Let's see. We have to go way, way back. So kind of the starting point for design for me is I went to school for graphic design. That was my major. Back in the day, there was mostly very traditional graphic design classes. We were literally not using our computer and learning how to draw typefaces and things like that. I think I took one, obviously most of our classes we were using the Creative Suite, but I took one class about Flash and how to create websites in Flash. So that was really what I had my web experience from school. I did work at the school newspaper as a graphic designer, and so I created a lot of the ads, and that was pretty fun. So that was definitely where I started my creative journey, would definitely be in graduating with a degree in graphic design. From there, I got my first job. I was a junior graphic designer at Crocs, the shoe company. So this was a huge opportunity for me. I got to work in a world-known company, corporate America, diving into the unknown for me. So what I really learned, I was there for 4 years. So I worked my way up from junior designer to graphic designer. I did a lot of website design, emails, print, and store. So I really got my hands dirty with everything traditional graphic design, as well as some email and website design in those 4 years. That was an amazing experience, being able to work at a company where there was hierarchy, there was structure, there was a lot of designers that I could collaborate with, and kind of design leads and creative directors and all of that good stuff. So that was a really great experience. But I got to this point where I realized that I wanted something a little smaller, and I wanted to try the agency world and working with a few different brands, because I had been working with the same brand for 4 years. So I also was still looking at a graphic design position, but I took a position at a kind of small agency. It was basically me and one other designer, and then the creative director. And this was when we dove into, I got to do a lot of branding, which was really, really fun. And I also got to start to do a lot of websites. So this is really kind of the first time I started working in UI UX before UI UX was a thing. We were building websites. We were working with developers in those early stages. And that was kind of this aha of oh, this is the web. This is really interesting. Designing something that's not pixel perfect or that can change the next couple months, and working on a screen versus working for print and printing things. That was something that was really intriguing to me. So I worked there for a couple years, and I basically went through this midlife crisis at 26. Was oh my gosh, am I just going to be sitting at my desk designing for the rest of my life? How am I going to work my way up? I want more adventures. I want to do more. I want to explore more. What can I do? And so I applied to this program called Remote Year, where it was basically you travel the world for 12 months, and every month you go to a different location. So I applied, and I got in, and I was like, okay, this is exactly what I want to do. And because I got into that, I knew I had to quit my job. And so then I was like, okay, this is forcing me, this is the opportunity for me to go freelance, to try this thing that I can combine the skills that I've learned. I can get my own customers, which was really important to me as well after working for companies in the past. Is like, I know the types of people I like to work with, and I'm excited to kind of search for those companies or search for those projects that I'm really passionate about. So I took the leap and I went full-time freelance while traveling, which was exciting and daunting. What I learned in that year from design was that traveling and being creative and just opening my mind to new things really pushed me to do some passion projects and to focus on some kind of different, just think about design differently. It also taught me that I didn't need to be sitting at my desk 9 to 5 to be able to have a successful career. It also gave me that opportunity to take breaks and work with customers and not work with customers depending on what I was doing, and the flexibility was really, really intriguing to me. I also started to work a lot with, this is kind of when I made that transition to product design, is UI UX. As I started working a lot at the very forefront of UI UX when they were like searching for the beginnings of UI UX, and I got to help build some interesting products along the way. And I think it was in those early stages of that UI UX boom. It's like learning best practices, and a lot of the time I was just taking my graphic design skills and the web knowledge that I knew and just kind of winging it. And along the way it was like doing user testing and understanding what users want, and slowly starting to understand like what that space looks like and how you can combine users and empathy and understanding them and understand what are best practices on the web, and kind of combining that, and also graphic design, which kind of translates to me to UI. It's like that traditional, like I think you have to have that skill set, you have to grow that skill set, you have to know like the color theory, you have to know all of these bottom lines of like what makes design, and that's definitely very core of graphic design. So I think taking that knowledge also helped with UI, UX. And so after that year, I went back home and I was like, okay, I'm ready. I think I'm ready to dive into a full-time gig again. Because I had done that freelance year and I was excited about it, but then I was like, okay, going back to a life, I feel like I had all these crazy adventures, and I was looking for jobs, still doing freelance on the side for probably 3 to 4 months after the program ended. And I got offered a position that was like $100K, which was way more than I was making freelancing. And I sat with it. It was going to be in a corporate setting. And I was like, this is not what I want. I do not want to work at a corporate company, to be tied to my desk. I found this process of freelancing and living and working and doing all the work I needed to, but also not feeling like I was stuck in that grind. And I still had this desire to continue traveling. So I continued to stay full-time freelance, and I started traveling again. And I said, no, I didn't want that job. So all that to say also is I also learned the value of money and those golden handcuffs, and that golden handcuffs really tie you down. Someone's going to offer you all that money. Is that really going to make you happy? To me, the answer is no. I get that for some people there's expectations and there's things you have to get done, but I think the golden handcuffs, what that represents is very much what I talk with friends and other colleagues and people trying to make it in the career of product design. Sorry, this is going long now. Let's see. So started traveling again and doing full-time freelance. And this was when I started to kind of do more freelance and take on more responsibilities and kind of bring on other designers to help me with some projects I was doing. So I was kind of starting to build this agency, but still under my name. And about when the pandemic hit, that was basically when my co-founder and husband, Alex, and I were talking about what can we do. I have some designers helping me out with some projects. What if we were to turn it into more of an agency model, and what does that agency model look like? And I've worked with startups. So basically when I started freelancing, I mostly worked within the startup space and found a real passion for it. And we wanted to play with this idea of combining the agency world and helping startups. And that's really where the subscription-based model that really represents TDP came from. So you pay a monthly fee. So we think of it as SaaS, but we call it DaaS, Design as a Service. So offering that subscription base for startups. And we launched 2 years ago. Lots of ups and downs, but it's like my baby. We've been able to grow it. We've had some amazing designers such as yourself be able to join the team. And yeah, that's kind of moving my role from doing all of the work to being more of a design lead, and then also kind of co-founding a company. So there's a lot of things I do today that are not design focused. So it's just kind of juggling and balancing what that looks like and what that means to me at this stage. Sorry, I didn't mean for it to go so long, but that's it.
I love it. I love that. I love hearing your journey from, starting out after college, graduating college with graphic design and starting at your first career, your first job, and, moving into through all of these like different types of work environments and such. I love hearing all about it. And it sounds like you have such great experience in all different types of roles and, jobs. And I love that you're able to find out what works best for you and follow your heart. I think that is what a lot of people listening on this podcast would be interested in hearing is, how did you get to where you're at? So that's so cool. Thank you for sharing your story with me, Dianne. That's awesome. You went through a lot of different things, and so I'm going to probably dig a little bit deeper into these topics, but I'd love to get to know, I guess I would love to learn more about, your time in remote year and what was that like freelancing and traveling at the same time. I think that is a dream for many people. So love to hear about your experience and I guess what was the work-life balance like?
Yeah, totally. I definitely, working and traveling is hard. Traveling is a full-time job within itself. So I did not work full-time while traveling. Occasionally I would take on gigs where I would work a lot, but it's really hard to juggle a full-time gig as well as doing all of the things you want to do. Because, we were in a different country every month, so it was like soaking up as much as we possibly could. So that work-life balance was hard. I highly suggest finding a workplace, a workspace. I actually right now personally do not like workspaces because I feel like I'm on calls all day and don't have that ability. But when I'm traveling, I feel like it's like a dedicated place, right? So I have my dedicated office at home, but I didn't have a dedicated place. So I think having that office space and like kind of being like, okay, this is when you're going to go to work was really important. I definitely think knowing that you should save some time to do all the other things you want to do, and that's really why you're traveling, is super important. It also helped me kind of gauge and understand what kind of projects I wanted to take on because I knew that I wouldn't have the flexibility that maybe some of the projects required. So it really was like, I had a lot of conversations. I cold emailed a ton of companies that I was interested in working with. And it was really about me like reaching out to them and telling them what my specialty was and making it really personalized and kind of following up with them. And that's kind of how I started to build my base of customers that I was working with. They all knew that I would be traveling and that I would maybe be in different time zones, and they were also very respectful of that. So I think it was finding these customers that were really aligned with that place I was in my life and respectful of that, and also knowing that I would deliver the best work always. So that was interesting to kind of find those customers that I was excited to take on. Another thing that was very interesting, and I think I talked a little bit about money, was that I learned that I could live with much less than I ever thought I could, especially in a lot of foreign countries. It's way, way cheaper to live. And so that gave me the opportunity to just like enjoy the places I was in and not have to work much, and knowing that the amount I was spending while traveling for everything was way cheaper than what I was spending before traveling. So yeah, I guess that kind of like summarizes working and traveling. I guess the last thing I would say is like, I think I mentioned this before, is like the creativity that kind of inspires you while you're traveling. You get to go to all of these amazing museums, and getting the culture and the local art scene of all of these places was definitely really inspiring to me. And I found myself like wanting to try personal projects, and to just like, it just opened my mind. It just left me feeling like really positive in a creative way. That sometimes I think as a creative person, it's hard because sometimes it's hard to be creative, right? Like you wake up in the morning and you're like, oh, I don't feel like it. And so I felt like I really just always had this like on, whether it was me just brainstorming ideas or doing personal or customer work.
Yeah, absolutely. Like designer block is a real thing, right?
Yes, very much so. Creativity is hard. It's hard to do it every day. It definitely like takes practice to get to that level of always sitting at your desk and just being able to get into that creative groove.
So I love that you talked about your experience about like, you know, what it was like sitting in in corporate, sitting at a desk, you know, with structure, and then from you transitioning into a more like flexible environment where you really took control and power over your own schedule and the projects that you got to pursue. And I had a question about, we talked a little bit about like creativity and like designer's rut. What helps you get out of that designer rut or that designer block? Like what gets you inspired?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's an interesting question now because I feel like I'm at this place in my career where I would consider myself like an expert in a lot of the things I'm doing. And so it does come pretty naturally now when I sit down and I'm like, okay, I plan out my day. I know this is when I'm doing deep work time. And when I get into deep work, if I'm actually designing, like that is my happy place because I know what I'm doing. I feel confident in what I'm doing. And it's like just a switch for me these days. I think about like at the beginning of my career, sitting at that desk, like it's definitely hard to get into that creative pattern. I think that early on in my career, something that was great was having design coworkers to brainstorm ideas, or if I get stuck to just say, hey, like, what do you think of this? I definitely think in the agency, when I was in the small agency, the designer that I worked closely with there, like, I think we would brainstorm a lot and we had a really good rhythm. So I think, especially if you just have that one person you can go to and kind of like open that space of getting feedback, or just like, hey, I'm in this rut, do you just have like 10 minutes to just brainstorm or take a look at my designs? I think that's really, really impactful. And that is what we try to do at the design project. So a big part of the design project is we say we have this agency, and that means that the designers come together weekly and get to share the designs they're working on, get feedback on maybe places that they're struggling. And I guess that is the number one thing I would recommend. I didn't know that's where I was going when I started this, but yes, I would say definitely having other designers to brainstorm is probably the best way to get out of that design rut.
You kind of answered my next question that I was really curious to learn more about, was like, out of your experiences, in these different work environments, like what are the pros and cons of each? I love that you talk about like sometimes having another designer on the team would really, I don't know, like have the ability to like bounce ideas off of. What was your freelancing experience like working on your own, maybe in a different country? How was that experience?
Yeah, great question. So yes, I was definitely alone in that world. And I definitely was selling myself on things that maybe I wasn't as experienced as I sold myself as. So a lot of that was definitely doing a lot of research, doing a lot of deep diving into the programs I was using. Back then it was still a Creative Cloud, so we were designing UI in like Photoshop. And so I spent a lot of time researching best practices, and that is actually probably another big thing that I do with everything. Anything creative. I think about I'm building like a tiny home and I pull inspiration and research is probably like the number one place for me to start on any project. And so by seeing what others have done, it just gives me inspiration and ideas. I can just like, on top of that, go even deeper. So I'm constantly like looking at what other people have done and what best practice, today we call them best practices, what they are today, to see what I could do. So I definitely spent a lot of time just like researching and diving deep into what were web best practices back then and kind of creating a framework for myself as I went. I'm not sure if that answered your question.
Yeah, it did. You actually started I love that you started talking about, the kind of like the places or your methodology defining inspiration. Do you have any like go-to sites or maybe blog posts or websites that you typically use to look for inspiration?
So for UX, the place that I usually go to get my tips and tricks is Nielsen Norman Group. They've been around forever, and I think they are just very focused on best practices. Nothing trendy, like it's like set in stone. It's like what's based on data, based on research, this is proven. And I really appreciate that from a UX perspective. UI, I highly suggest looking at current products, that are usually competitors, what's out there. We all kind of hopped on that Dribbble bandwagon for a while, and Dribbble is great looking stuff, but functionality wise, I think it kind of misses the mark as far as following great UI with pairing it with UX. And so a lot of times when I'm pulling inspo, I'm looking at current products. I have been using the app Mobin recently, where it has a lot of iOS and Android screenshots of a ton of different products, and that's been really useful. So I don't have to actually download them or pay for them. I can literally just go to this website. So right now, those are the two that come to my mind.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome. I think I've heard of Mobin, but I haven't used it yet, so I'm excited to try it out.
Yes, definitely do.
Okay. And I also love that you talked about, I think at the beginning of our conversation, you talked about how you pretty much saw the boom of UX and just the field of UX starting to form itself. What was that like in that experience? Like, I know there's a lot of terms that just kind of pop up like here and there that, maybe there wasn't like a maturity to the industry yet, but I'd love to hear more about your experience about being able to see that boom of UX and UI.
Yeah, looking at it in hindsight, because when I was in it, like, it just evolved. Like, I don't think there was ever this moment where I was like, oh, this is UI, UX, and this is what I do, and this is how much money I'm going to make by doing it. I think in hindsight now, it's very much, it is these trendy terms, and it is almost thought of as like it's been around forever, and it hasn't. And so a lot of the times when I am talking about UI UX, especially with customers, I don't use those trendy terms because I think a lot of our customers aren't in that space and don't understand. And I don't know, I guess I've just like gotten out of that habit, and I just try to bring everything down to as real of a level as possible and just talk like as straightforward as possible so everyone can understand. So I definitely don't find myself like using all of those terms. I think some of them are really popular and make sense. But yeah, I think what UX has UX UI product design has brought to the industry, and one of the reasons why I say I love product design versus graphic design, me personally, is because it is combining like the psychology of people, and it is understanding people and showing empathy for people. And that was never something that really existed. Like, we would just say, this is the brand, this is how we're going to do it, we're going to build a website and we're not going to have anyone review it, like this is what it is. And so I guess looking back at it, that now that we can, and it is popular, and it is a job where we get to ask for people's opinions and build designs based on data and best practices, gives it just more. And it's also, like I say a lot of the times, like you and I just had a customer meeting actually, and we were going back and forth with our customer of like, what's the right answer? And we're like, none of us know, we can go in circles all day, but let's put it in front of some users and test it before we build it. And when you and I brought that up, like, da-da, like that's a great idea. And so I think that's probably like what has pushed me even further into this product design UI UX field, is being able to still be creative and use colors and now animations and Web3 and all these amazing things that the web does, and also combine that with building something that users can actually use.
Yeah. I love everything that you said about that. It's almost like an added extra layer to design, where it becomes almost strategizing in addition to the UI work, like designing the actual interfaces and the color palettes and the graphics and the interactions, right?
Yes, very
Awesome.
much so.
So I love that you talked a lot about, like, in hindsight, like looking back at the industry and your experience. Where do you see the design industry going? Do you have any predictions for the future, or?
Yeah, I mean, I think the design industry is going to change a lot, and that it's not going to be visual. So thinking of Alexa and self-driving cars and all of these things that are coming out, they all use UX and they need UX, and that's still kind of a new field, like bringing UX into voice. And so I definitely see like the not moving away from visuals. I think visuals will always be there, but like in addition to also bringing in other ways of designing, and using empathy and best practices. And I think product designers still very much can be in that world as well. I also think that accessibility is becoming more and more popular for a good reason, because a lot of the times early on we were just building for the one person, the one set of people. And as we know, there's tons of people with tons of different accessibility needs. And I mean, even outside of product design, just like everyone is just focusing more on accessibility. And I think that's really important. So I definitely also see the need to build more for accessibility people, people with accessibility differences. And I mean, things like building for the older generations, and as people age, like we're still using technology and they love technology, but they might not be able to click the buttons in the same way that they used to, and the colors might not look as clear. And so that's definitely a huge one I see continuing to kind of build from there. I would definitely say crypto. I know right now crypto is kind of being thrown for a loop, but me personally, having been able to design for some blockchain and crypto companies, there's just a lot of, it's kind of like outer space. It's like, or like when the .com era, like no one knows how to design, no one knows what's even there. And so that's kind of exciting to be able to build for kind of an industry that never existed, and just kind of building it from scratch. So yeah, I guess those three I would say is the future in my mind.
Yeah, that's crazy. To be able to live in a world where maybe as product designers you could be building like holograms or something like that, or like maybe like no UIs in a way,
right?
Like no physical UIs.
Right. Totally. Yeah. A lot of our current projects, we're working on AR projects and VR projects, and it's really, really exciting. It's exciting to be in that space and to help build this frontier of design.
I really want to talk more about like from your experiences from like freelancing to starting your own company. I think that is so interesting, and I sure, like, I know for myself at least, like the goal is to ultimately be able to lead a team, or maybe just make an impact at like a startup company or something like that, right? So I would love to hear more about, you know, your experience. You were talking about in the pandemic, you kind of came to this aha moment that you wanted to run the ship yourself and not want to work for anyone else. What was the thing that sparked that thought?
Yeah, that's a great question. You know, I think what sparked it is that I had been working with a lot of startups. Whether it was just freelancing, I was full-time at a startup for a year during that period. And just that startup mentality and the passion that comes from those founders. Like, they come up with this idea and they get to start something. And so I always had this idea in the back of my mind that I liked the idea of starting something. I had no idea what that was. It was like, oh, I like that idea. And so it was logical that as a designer, if I started something that incorporated design that was already my passion and what I was doing, that would be a great thing. I didn't know what that looked like. I knew there was an agency component because that's what I had been doing. I was bringing freelance designers to help me do that. And Alex was really the one to come up with kind of like taking a spin on what an agency is. And that's also something like it was like doing all this research, like what's currently out there, what's in this space, how can we take that idea and play off of it and spin off it and do something new and do something different. So when Alex first pitched me the subscription, you can ask him, I was like, no, like that doesn't feel right. That's not how it works. And then slowly I was like, that's great. That's not how it works. Like, that's why it makes sense. And it took me quite a while to kind of like jump on that bandwagon. But the more and more I thought about it, I was like, some of the hardships, some of the really hard things about starting with an agency is all of the paperwork, understanding the scope, understanding all these things. That was very, very opposite of working in a startup space. Things change so rapidly. You can't define that. You can't work on that. Like, you're going to have designers jump around. Like, that's how it works. And so once I warmed up to the idea and I was like, okay, this does sound great. We did a lot of exercise. We sat down together. We brainstormed what this would look like. We tested. We had some designers early on that were working with us, kind of trying to build this model out of nothing. And a lot of it was just taking that current UI UX process and building it for our structure and using best practices and things that I knew and Alex knew from business and other designers' opinions, and just bringing it all together to build an internal process. And so TDP's definitely evolved quite a bit from early on. Like, we still have that subscription-based model, but now we have that process that we all follow, and we have resources for designers to be able to do these things quicker, and templates and everything like that. And I think that's really what has allowed us to get to this point that we are today, is the differentiation and also like the devotion that we all have to like building a better process, and making things easier for designers. So it's definitely been a challenge, kind of taking on your own company. I work a lot, so very opposite of my freelance, traveling the world, working part-time days. But it's really awesome to be working on something that's my own, or that I share a passion with all of these people that are also a part of the team. I'm very much about like ownership, and I want people that join TDP to also feel like they have that ownership and they're growing and expanding and learning and doing all the things that I think that I'm also doing at TDP. I would say the hardest thing is that I'm doing a lot less design and a lot of unknowns. So I think you asked me the question of like, how do I get into that design mode? And I said, it comes really naturally right now. Like, I've just been doing it for so long. But what doesn't come naturally is accounting or managing teams of people, understanding customers, understanding churns, understanding customer success, all these things that are new to me that I have to learn from scratch, is exciting, but also very, very exhausting. And it's like, I feel like I'm constantly like, oh, I'm failing. But sometimes I'm not. Sometimes I feel okay. So it's hard in that sense. It's also hard as like, you kind of feel like you have this company's weight on your shoulders, and while it's a good thing, sometimes it's like a heavy load to carry. So I wouldn't change it for the world, but I definitely think it takes a specific kind of person to kind of decide to become a founder and really be able to stick with it and push through the hard times no matter what, and continue to just push and push until it becomes something that they want.
Absolutely. That's so awesome. And you're doing a great job, Dianne. Everybody at TDP, we all love you. So
thank you. Sometimes I appreciate the good words, because sometimes it's hard. But also, just to add to that, as you know, as TDP, we're very much about feedback. That's also super important to me. So being honest and open and having people come to me and tell me things that I need to be doing better, and me being able to go to the team and tell them where I think that they need to improve is also really, really important to me. And I think that's also led to TDP's success. We're all just so open and honest with each other, that I think that's also helped a lot in our success.
Yeah, absolutely. It sounds like the culture is what really helps the company's success, right? Because companies are built by people.
Yes. Yes.
Can you tell me a little bit about your challenges of building a team, like going from, you as a designer to maybe building your team of like designers to now building ultimately a company with many designers?
Yeah. I mean, this is definitely me feeling like I never really I feel like, what's it? The syndrome? Yes, that's what I'm looking for. It definitely feels like imposter syndrome. I started bringing on freelance designers and working my way up and starting TDP, hiring other designers. And I always just felt like that's really hard to lead people. And a lot of the times, managers, they're just kind of like, they get like, from a designer standpoint, it's like you grow to senior designer and then you become a manager. In a lot of industries, it's like that. You just get to a point, they're like, okay, now you can become a manager. Managing people is hard, and there's a lot of things behind it that they don't teach you. And so I have read so many books. I've done so much research, and I really want to become a good manager, and I want to become a manager based on some of the past experiences I've had with managers and differences that I want to do. And asking friends that have been managers, that are managers, I'm just constantly trying to get as much knowledge as I can to be better at bringing on more designers and managing them. So some of the really big things that I guess I've learned, is I definitely like to hold people's hands. I want to make sure they're okay, and I want to be like, hey, can you do this? Or I'll help you do this. And what I'm learning is I just need to go let them fail and try again, instead of feeling like I have to get them to a good point. Because I really think that where learning comes in is when you have that time to try hard to figure out, and you get frustrated and you can't figure out, and then you do in that aha moment. So I think like pushing my designers, go, try it, it's gonna be hard, you're gonna fail. And I really think that that's a huge learning that I've had. I also think that learning about the designer's growth path and really where they see themselves and building out a plan for them is huge too, because I think that a lot of designers feel stuck, or they don't know when to ask for that raise, or they don't know when to ask for that promotion. And just having those conversations often about like, where do you see yourself? Like, how can we get you there? What skills do you want to learn? And working through that and just being really open about that has also been really important in kind of leading and managing. The last thing is hiring. Hiring is also very hard. I know applying to jobs is hard, and I know it's a really tough space, and I know a lot of times it feels bad and you just keep applying, you don't hear anything, and I know that. I will say on the other side of the table, it's also very hard. I like feel connections with these people, but maybe they're not a good fit, and then I have to let them down. Like, that's really hard for me, and I'm trying to just like get better, because knowing if I don't tell them that, or if I take them on just because I like them, even though I don't think they're going to be a good fit, it's going to be bad for everyone. So I think that we now have a much better process of hiring, and we have a list of kind of our values. We call it our DNA, that we want all of the team to really kind of fall into and to respect and to also feel passionate about. So we ask specific questions, and we don't do, like before I was like, oh, hey, this is just a casual interview, let's just chat. And now I'm like, okay, here's a set of questions I want to ask you that are interviewee, because I need to make sure that you can answer them in the way that we need to be answered to hire. So that's been huge too, is kind of bringing that hiring process and being able to make sure we're weeding out the people that are just not the best position not the best fit for that position for so many different reasons. Not that they're not a great designer, not that they're not a great person, just they're not a good fit for TDP or just for the position or for whatever. And then really also kind of bringing on people that we think are always, that are raising the bar. So yeah, I think those three things are what I've learned about managing in the past 2-3 years it's been very hard, but we got there.
That's awesome. I love that in today's session, we talked a lot about your experience from, going through as a graphic designer, starting your first job in corporate, your first big girl job, and then moving into freelancing world, and then to really just deciding that you wanted more for yourself and jumping into like starting your own company. I also love that we talked a lot about where you find inspiration as a designer in all of your environments, and a little bit about TDP and what it's like to be a founder on the other, a founder and like an employer, I guess, on the other side of the table for the people that are designers and looking for a job. So I wanted to ask, like, what is the future for TDP? What's your vision for TDP?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I feel like I've said that every question you've asked. That's a great question. So I'll just repeat it again. TDP, where we want to go is that we want to build an agency that's accessible for everyone. Again, that keyword, accessibility. So that's really kind of this mission that we've redefined, is like we want to build for the small company, for anyone and everyone that's building some product that users are going to use. We want to make sure that all users have a great experience. So that really is our mission, and we're just continuing to build on top of that, building better processes, testing processes, building platform. Potentially TDP could be a platform where the designer and the customer have an interface, and that's how they communicate. And there's a lot of automation and things just to make the designer and the customer's life way easier. Like, let's put something on the calendar, it happens automatically, or just chatting in a different way. There's just so many things we can do there. We also are trying to think of places that TDP can go. Where else can we go? Maybe there's other things outside of the agency world that TDP can become. There's a lot of templates out there. Like, how can we templatize our process? How can we sell more things to help designers get better at designing and less at wasting their time? So I think it's all focused on the designer and the customer, and we're just open to brainstorming other ways that TDP can kind of work in that space. So yeah, if you're a part of TDP, we're always testing and like coming up with weird ideas and throwing them to the wall and see if they stick.
Yes, we do a lot of testing, iterating, and back to the drawing board. But that's the most fun about TDP, is that environment to do so. I have a final question for you, Dianne, is where do you see yourself growing as a designer, a founder, professional?
Yeah, I think that my growth is with TDP. I think whatever changes, whatever new ideas we come to, it's me learning and growing and trying new things. So I definitely think like TDP is my future, and I want to continue to see it through and continue to build upon it and build all the amazing things we're doing. And I think that's one of the great things about being a founder, is like definitely feels like my baby, and I definitely want to continue to stick to it and through hard times and good times, and continue to test and build and discuss and come up with like what TDP can potentially become.
I love that. Awesome. Thank you so much, Dianne. There were so many topics that you talked about that I wanted to dive deeper in, but I know we're short on time. So maybe in the next time or at some point we can dive a little bit deeper. Thank you so much, Dianne, for hopping on and sharing a little bit about your story and your journey.
Thank you, Sam. It was awesome to chat more with you and kind of open up and answer some of your questions. So I really appreciate it. Thank you so much, and I look forward to doing this again.